Hi guys, it's Amber from Amber Eats Books, and I'm here today to bring you my weekly reads. This is the video where I tell you what I read last week, what I'm currently reading, and what I plan to read for the upcoming week. I had such a crazy week. My best friend came in from out of town. It was my birthday. I had training for work. It was just a lot of stuff going on, but I still managed to read quite a bit. So let's get into these books. As always, I'm going to start with my least ranked and work my way up to my highest ranked. Now this week overall was a pretty good reading week, but there were a couple of books that I just couldn't make it through, and one of those books happened to be The Zookeeper's Wife by Diane Ackerman. I gave this a solid try. I want to say it was maybe 60 pages in where I DNF'd this. I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember. It was probably almost a week ago now that I read this, but this was supposed to be a story based on true events about a zookeeper and his wife who helped save, I think, over 300 people during World War II. So I went into this book hearing that topic, hearing what it was about, expecting to be immediately gripped and expecting a very emotionally packed story. However, that is not what I was getting as I went into it, and I just couldn't continue on with the reading. The writing itself could be beautiful in parts. There was a few very beautiful descriptions. However, the writing was also very long-winded. It just went above and beyond what was needed for each scene, and I feel like the long-windedness of the words kind of took away from the emotional impact of the story. It also veered off topic quite often. It would be talking about the zookeeper's wife, then all of a sudden be talking about these lace curtains that she bought back in this era and how it came to be and the history of those curtains, and it just kind of kept branching off in those little tidbits. I also really wanted a lot more emotion. I got 60 pages in and I still was not feeling emotionally connected to any of these characters. So I just could not do it. I just could not finish it. I did not have it in me to continue on with the story. I ended up going on Goodreads and looking up reviews, and a lot of people had that same sort of opinion as I did, so I felt a little bit validated. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but validated in the sense that, okay, I DNF'd it, other people didn't enjoy it as much as they thought they were going to, so I felt like I made an okay decision not finishing it. For me personally, I don't know if I want to give it a full rating. I guess if I had to for myself, it'd be 2 stars. But again, I didn't finish it. Maybe someone else out there would have enjoyed it more than I did. But I will read the first sentence of this, just kind of give you an example of the writing. It said, at dawn in an outlying district of Warsaw, sunlight swarmed around the trunks of blooming linden trees and crept up the walls of a 1930s stucco and glass villa where the zoo director and his wife slept in a bed crafted from white birch, a pale wood used in canoes, tongue depressors, and Windsor chairs. The next book that I read this week was Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. I gave this 3 stars. It had its moments. It was enjoyable to read. Each story, of course, with a short story collection. I like some more than I liked others. I kind of base my scoring for short story collections on how many more I liked than how many I disliked. This was probably about even, so I rated it a 3. Some of the images in these stories disturbed me so much. He has a way with words and a way with this imagery that even me, a horror fan, someone who absolutely loves to read Stephen King, just could not get some of these images out of my head and was completely horrified and had to put the book down because I was reading it before bed. It overall, I think, is a good solid collection, and like I said, if you can handle some disgusting and some gore and some scenes and just mentally kind of messes with you, then absolutely I would recommend this book for you. If that is not your thing, then please don't pick this up, because even for someone who is a seasoned horror reader, it was just disturbing sometimes. But I love Chuck Palahniuk's writing style. I really didn't know if I connected with it so much when I read Fight Club, which was my first Chuck Palahniuk book, but in this book I actually really connected with it. I really enjoyed it. and I definitely want to continue on and read more books by him. The first sentence of this book was, "This was supposed to be a writer's retreat." The next book that I read was actually a carryover from last week, and that was American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I loved this book. It was so good. I gave this book 4 stars. I will say in a few parts it does get a bit slow, but overall I really enjoyed it. I love Neil Gaiman's writing, and I was ecstatic to find out that this was going to be a TV show, because I feel that the content really can lend itself to a really good TV show. So I'll be excited to check that out and to see what they did with it. But overall, I want to say that it had really descriptive writing that was so, it wasn't flowery, it wasn't overbearing, but it was very to the point, but really made you feel like you were in these situations. I thought that the take on the gods in this book was very inventive, and like I said, I really am expecting the TV show to be able to play off of that, and I'm thinking it's going to be really great. And the cons for this book, I will say, like I said, a little slow at times. It was very large. With those slow moving sections, I felt like it could have been cut out. Now, some of it could have been cut out. Now, I think that might have had something to do with, this was the 10th anniversary edition that I read, and I believe that it was as unedited as it could be. He went in and put back in things that maybe had been taken out of the original printing. So maybe that had something to do with why I felt it was a little slow moving. But like I said, some parts could have been cut out. Otherwise, though, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Shadow is a great character, and I just can't wait to read more Neil Gaiman books, because this one really, blew my mind. The first sentence in this book is, "Shadow had done 3 years in prison." The next book that I read was Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. Now, this was actually a YA graphic novel. This is only my second go around with a graphic novel, so I thought this book was fantastic. I rated it 4 stars. Maybe someone with a little bit more experience might not have rated it so high, but for me, it was a 4-star read. I thought that the illustrations coupled with the stories was just a really good combination. Now, the stories themselves were at times a little predictable. You kind of knew it was going to happen, but still it just gave me like that Halloween vibe that I was really looking for this month. And it was really great to read this in like a half an hour. It was just something that kind of broke up all my other reading that I did this week. And it was just something that I thoroughly enjoyed. So I couldn't go wrong when I picked this one up. I really recommend it to anyone that just wants a light horror read, nothing that is going to keep you up at night. The first sentence of this book is, "When I was little, I used to read before I slept at night." The next book that I read this week was Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. This was my second favorite book of the week. I rated this 4 stars. It was really good. I read this book in one sitting. I just happened to wake up on Saturday with a horrible cold, not this Saturday, the Saturday prior, with a horrible cold. I didn't want to get up off the couch. I pretty much just laid there all day, and I thought, what better way to cure my ails than to sit down with a cup of tea and a book, and that is what I did. I just sat there and I read for a couple of hours and got right through this. I absolutely adored the characters. Obviously, this deals with heavy-hitting, emotional stuff, so it's not like I want to sit here and say, oh, I love the characters, I love the story. I love the emotions that it invoked in me, I guess would be a better term. I always find that World War II books, at least ones that are written really well, evoke that same emotional response, which they're meant to, because it's a devastating topic that you're reading about, and it's something that always hits me right in the feels. I want to say that this was very easy to read. Like I said, one sitting, it was done. Also, the characters I think were well developed. You kind of saw how a couple of the characters grew throughout the story, and they grew out of necessity, but still they grew, and it was interesting to see where they ended up. Also, I read Salt to the Sea just a couple weeks ago, and I was surprised to find that this was actually the cousin to one of the characters in that book. So it was kind of neat just to see the link into having read that story, see what this character was saying about that character, and just kind of already knowing. It just added another little layer to the story that I wouldn't have had if I had not read that other book. Some things I didn't like. I will say I didn't like it quite as much as Salt to the Sea. Maybe if I had read this one first, I would have liked this one better, and vice versa. But it just wasn't quite on that same level. Part of that, I think, probably had to do with Salt to the Sea was told from different points of view, four different points of view, I want to say, and this is only told from one point of view. So for me, books that are told from one point of view can sometimes get a little stagnant in places, as opposed to multiple points of view where you don't really get bored. You're constantly switching in and out of these characters. But those are the only two things that I could say that I didn't like about the book. And they didn't even drive me crazy, those two things. So I highly recommend this book, especially if you are in love with kind of like historical fiction. This is definitely a book that I would recommend for you. And the first sentence of this book was, "They took me in my nightgown." The last book that I read this week was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Now, I went into this book hoping that it would live up to the expectations people had put upon it. And you know what? It really did not disappoint. I was so happy that I loved this book. I mean, I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was fantastic. I just was thrilled that it didn't disappoint me like Illuminae did. Illuminae, I really had high expectations. I went into it and it wasn't for me. This, completely the opposite. I went to it with high expectations and those were met and I was completely satisfied. This is the story of a boy who enters this contest in the year 2044, and this contest is to win a company, a virtual reality company, pretty much where the world that we know resides in this virtual reality, because the outside world is so grim and dark. They live in their video game systems. They even go to school in their video game systems. So he is in this contest to try and win the company and a whole bunch of money. And he was so fun to read. This book in general just made my inner geek so delighted. I was so happy. It had old video game references. It had like 80s references to movies and TV shows and things like that. And it was just fantastic. I loved the world and the characters. I thought each one was unique and really added an element to the story that was needed. And I really didn't want to put it down. I mean, my best friend was here, and if she had not been here and I had not been busy, I probably would have read this in one sitting. I loved it so much. I just couldn't put it down. Every time she, stepped away to do something or whatever it was, go to take a shower or whatever, when I wasn't entertaining, I picked this book up and I was just like devouring it. I absolutely adored it. I did get to read it, over the course of one 24-hour period. So I did read it quickly. I just didn't get to read it in that one sitting like I probably really wanted to do. All that being said, the only negatives I could probably say about this book, there was something that had to do with one character that I didn't really agree with the writer's choice decision on what they did with that character. It was kind of like a surprise, and I just didn't agree with it. I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to give anything away. So when you read, you can figure out what I'm talking about. I did feel like the ending could have just been a little better. That's why I didn't get that 5 stars for me. It just seemed to wrap up a little too quickly, and it just wasn't the ending that I felt satisfied with. So for me, that's why I knocked off that 1 star. This might be more like a 4.5 star read. I'm not exactly sure. Now that I've been reflecting on it for almost a week, I feel like I might bump it up to 4.5 stars, but overall, just a really, really fantastic read. And anyone who loves 80s and old video games, you have to read this because it will just make you so happy. And I really want a copy of this for myself to go back and reread it again, because I think I will find even more little hidden gems in there that I didn't see the first time. The first sentence of this book is, Everyone my age remembers where they were and what they were doing when they first heard about the contest. So that wraps up all the books that I read this week. Now, I'm currently between 3 to 4 books reading, which never happens for me. I am such a monogamous reader. I normally read a book and finish it before I move on to the next. But this week just kind of is a crazy week coming up. So we will just get into them and I will show you what I mean. So firstly this week, my daughter and I are behind on the Goosebumps along, which I discussed in a previous video. So we are trying to hurry up and finish The Ghost Next Door. I started this with her. We still have one more that they're actually starting today, so we're behind a little bit. So we have to read this and then move on to maybe The Haunted Mask. We'll see how this week goes. Then I am also doing a buddy reads, and I'm reading Pet Sematary by Stephen King. And I'm reading this with Liz and Jay. I will link their channels down below. I am loving this. It is a reread for me. We're doing it in sections, so I am up to page 62. It is so good so far, and it is just the perfect October read. So I will let you guys know how this goes. I'm not sure exactly when I'll be finishing it, but definitely I will keep you updated as we go along. Then for my birthday, here's a little sneak preview. My daughter bought me A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. I was dying to have this sequel. Ember in the Ashes was probably one of my favorite YA books of the year, and I just couldn't resist starting it right away. Now, I haven't had too much reading time, but I am 137 pages in. But here lies my problem. I definitely want to finish reading A Torch Against the Night. But today, Monday, the 17th of October, Spookathon has started. And as of, what time is it? I can't even see. 2:15 in the afternoon. I have not read anything for actual Spookathon. So hopefully I will be getting to those books and maybe being able to fit A Torch Against the Night in somewhere in between. Now I made full announcement video for Spookathon and my TBR video, so you guys will probably already know these books, but I'll just show them quickly. All the links were in that previous video. I'm going to read Alice by Christina Henry. This is the first one I'm picking up. I'm hopefully going to be starting this today. I am also going to be reading The Fireman by Joe Hill. I heard some mixed things about this. Some people really loved it and other people didn't, so we'll see how that goes. I'm planning on reading The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Black. I know this has to do with vampires. I'm not sure how I feel about vampires anymore, but we'll give it a shot because my daughter said it was really good. Then I'm going to be reading Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. Again, I'm not going to butcher the author's name. I again have heard some mixed reviews, so we'll see how this goes. And then I also am going to try to read Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I've seen the movie. I'm hoping that the book is just as good and I don't have a problem going from movie to book. So we'll see. So those are all the things that I am currently reading and planning on reading. I don't know how it will go. We will see. But I hope to get to mostly everything. If I don't, as always, I will just move them on to next week's TBR. If you guys have read any of these books or share any of my same opinions on the ones that I read, or want to give me your opinions on the ones that I'm currently reading or wanting to read, please use the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. And as always, I hope you guys have a great week and happy reading.